At auction, widow acquires Alf King, unknowing he loved her for years. The city had never felt more distant, more cold. Since her husband's death, the world seemed hollow, as though the colors had drained from it, leaving only shadows. She had come to the auction out of curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, a restless whisper in her heart telling her to step beyond her grief, if only for a night. The auction hall was enormous, its walls carved from black stone that glimmered faintly in the candlelight. A hush settled over the crowd as murmurs of excitement and speculation rose like smoke. Ilara paused at the entrance, her heart a mixture of dread and anticipation. Here, nobles and merchants from across the kingdom gathered, bidding on rare treasures, ancient jewels, exotic beasts, lands with legends attached to them, and most strangely of all, people. Her eyes widened when she saw the first items being paraded on the raised platform. They were nothing like the objects she had expected. Each human lot seemed to carry a presence, a quiet power, a weight of history. Ilara felt a shiver creep down her spine. Something about this place felt almost alive, as though the hall itself was watching her, waiting. Then she saw him. He stood at the edge of the platform, tall and poised, dressed in deep, dark robes that shimmered with an almost imperceptible light. His hair was black as midnight, his eyes a storm of gray and silver, and his face was carved with elegance and a sternness that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. He did not bow or lower his gaze as the auctioneer announced his lot. He simply stood, still and unwavering, as though the world around him had no power over him. Ilara's breath caught. There was something magnetic about him, something that tugged at her chest in a way she did not understand. He was not handsome in the ordinary sense. His beauty was sharper, deeper, dangerous. And yet, for reasons she could not explain, she felt drawn to him, as if he had been waiting for her across the years. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the hall. Lot number 83. A man of rare blood and greater secrets. He has traveled lands untouched by common men, and he carries with him knowledge that many would kill to possess. Shall we begin the bidding? Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some spoke in awe, others in fear. A few dared to glance at him with suspicion, as though they felt his gaze, even though he had not looked at them. Ilara felt her pulse quicken. She knew she should turn away, leave this place, retreat to the safety of her quiet chambers, but she could not. Her feet moved forward almost of their own accord. The bidding began, loud and frenzied. Wealthy merchants raised their hands, nobles shouted numbers that made the coins in her purse feel insignificant. Yet none of this seemed to matter to her. Her eyes were fixed on him. She did not know why. Perhaps it was a force older than her own understanding, a pull that existed between two souls destined to meet. Minutes passed, and the bids climbed higher and higher. The hall seemed to blur around her. She was no longer surrounded by strangers and gold, there was only him. And then, without fully understanding how or why, she raised her hand. A single number left her lips, trembling yet firm. A hush fell. The auctioneer's eyes widened. "A new bid," he announced, surprised. From the lady in the black cloak, Lady Ilara herself. The bidding continued, faster now, more desperate. She felt her pulse hammer in her ears, felt the heat rise in her chest, a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. The world seemed to shrink to the space between them, the distance from where she stood to the platform where he remained still, statuesque, commanding yet patient. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only moments, the gavel came down. "Sold," the word echoed through the hall, final and irrevocable. Ilara felt her hands grow cold, her heart racing with a mixture of triumph and apprehension. The murmurs of the crowd faded into the background. She had won. He stepped down from the platform with a grace that was almost inhuman. His eyes met hers for the first time directly, and something in his gaze stopped her breath. There was recognition there, quiet and heavy, like the weight of untold centuries. His lips curved in the smallest of smiles, one that seemed almost sad. "I have waited," he said, his voice low and resonant, carrying a strange power that made the hair on her arms rise. Alara took a step back, startled. "Waited for me." He shook his head slightly, a shadow of a smile lingering. "For someone like you, perhaps longer than time itself." Her stomach fluttered, but she forced herself to remain composed. She did not understand what he meant. She only knew that her heart had begun to beat differently, faster, in a way it had not since her husband's death. She was drawn to him, inexplicably, dangerously. The auctioneer stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Lady Alara, your new acquisition requires your escort. Please follow the attendants." Alf King, she had learned his name only now, followed without protest, his eyes never leaving hers. She felt a strange warmth despite the chill in the hall, a heat that threaded through her chest, tugging at something she had thought long buried. The journey back to her estate was quiet, filled with an unspoken tension. Alf did not speak unless spoken to, but his presence was undeniable, pressing in around her like a living shadow. Alara could not stop stealing glances at him, studying the set of his jaw, the depth of his eyes, the way his movements seemed precise, measured, almost predestined. Finally, they arrived at her home, a grand but aging manor on the edge of a dark forest. The gates creaked open as the attendants led him inside. The halls smelled of cedar and old stone, familiar to her yet made strange by his presence. "You will find your quarters prepared," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She did not know why she felt nervous, as though speaking might shatter some fragile balance. "I do not require comfort," he said softly, "only your trust." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. She did not understand why his words stirred something deep inside her, why she wanted to trust him even though she had just met him. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay in her bed, staring at the candlelight flickering on the walls, and felt a restless pull toward the man who now shared her home. Alf, in his own chamber, was awake as well, staring into the darkness. His thoughts were heavy with memory, with longing. For decades he had watched her from afar, loving her in silence, powerless to claim her, bound by forces she could not yet understand. He had imagined this moment countless times, the moment when their paths would cross, when fate would allow him to step forward. And now that it had come, he feared he would fail. Morning came, pale and gray, and with it, a silence that spoke louder than words. Alf entered the main hall, moving with the same grace that had captivated her the night before. Alara, seated at the breakfast table, felt a flutter of anticipation she could not explain. "I will not leave you," he said suddenly, his gaze soft but unwavering. "And yet I must tread carefully. My presence may bring danger, though it is not my wish." Alara looked up, startled by the intensity in his eyes. "Danger? What do you mean?" He hesitated, as though measuring every word. "The world is not kind to those like us, and I have carried shadows with me that may touch you if I am not careful." She felt a thrill of fear and fascination. He was mysterious, powerful, and yet, somehow, achingly human in his yearning. She wanted to ask more, to understand, but the moment passed, leaving only the heavy air between them. As the sun rose over the distant hills, casting golden light across her estate, Alara realized something she had never admitted to herself. She was not afraid of him. She was drawn to him. And somehow she knew that their story had only just begun, though neither of them fully understood the depths it would reach. And somewhere in the shadowed corners of the hall, Alf smiled faintly, a single thought threading through his mind. "She has chosen me." And yet, does she know what she has truly claimed? The wind howled outside, rattling the ancient windows, as if the world itself held its breath for the story that had only just begun. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Lady Alara's estate, painting the stone floors in pale gold. Yet despite the light, a shadow lingered in the corners, as if Alf King had brought a part of the twilight world with him. Alara moved carefully through the halls, her hands brushing along the carved wooden panels, the air around her heavy with anticipation. Alf followed silently, a presence both protective and unnerving. He said little, but every movement, every glance seemed deliberate, as if he were measuring her reactions, testing the boundaries of a connection that neither fully understood. The estate had been quiet before, filled only with servants and the echoes of Alara's grief. Now, it felt alive in an entirely new way, charged with the subtle electricity of an unspoken bond. As they walked through the halls, the servants avoided their eyes, murmuring in hushed tones. Alf's reputation had preceded him, tales of dark powers, of noble blood tied to ancient curses, and of a man who moved like shadow and wind. None dared approach him closely, yet all felt the weight of his gaze, even when it was not directed at them. Alara tried to ignore the whispers, but her curiosity was growing. "Tell me," she said, stopping near the grand staircase, "why does everyone look at you as if you are dangerous?" Alf's gray eyes flicked toward her, unreadable yet intense. "Because in part I am," he said softly, "but danger is not always what it seems. Sometimes it hides truths that the world is afraid to face." Alara's heart quickened. She wanted to press for more, to understand the layers beneath his words, but something restrained her. She felt the weight of centuries in his silence, the gravity of a past she could not yet touch. The day passed slowly. Alf moved through the estate with a grace that was almost ethereal, attending to small details and observing everything as if reading the unseen threads of fate. Alara watched him, fascinated and unsettled, sensing that every action held meaning, every glance carried history. And yet he did not speak of the past, nor did he explain the shadows she glimpsed in his eyes. By afternoon, the sun had dipped low, casting long, dark streaks across the estate's gardens. Alara wandered among the hedges and stone paths, lost in thought. The grief she had carried for months now felt tangled with something else: curiosity, longing, fear, and a strange sense of inevitability. She had been drawn to him at the auction, but now, being near him, she realized how little she truly understood. Alf emerged silently behind her, as though he had been there all along. "The gardens suit you," he said, voice low. "They are a place of quiet reflection and secrets." Alara turned to face him, noticing for the first time the faint trace of sadness around his eyes. "Secrets?" she asked. He shook his head slightly. "There are things in the world that cannot be spoken aloud. Some truths are too heavy, too dangerous to share, and yet they linger, waiting for the right moment." She felt a shiver run through her. "Have you waited for such a moment?" Alf's gaze softened, but the shadows in his eyes did not fade. "Perhaps," he admitted, "and yet even now I am unsure if you would understand." The tension between them grew, silent and electric. Alara could feel the pull of him, not just in the room but in her chest, threading through her very bones. She tried to look away, to remind herself of the proprieties of her position, the mourning that still clung to her like a second skin. Yet she could not. Alf held her attention as easily as the moon holds the tides. Their quiet was interrupted by a knock at the door. A servant entered, holding a small, ornate box. "Lady Alara," the servant said softly, "this was delivered this morning. No sender's name, only a note." Alara took the note with trembling hands. Alf leaned closer, his presence warming the air around her. She opened the folded parchment and read the words aloud. "For her who sees beyond shadows, truths wait where time has slept. Seek the gallery in the east wing." Her pulse quickened. The east wing had been closed for years, sealed since her husband's death. Only rumors spoke of what lay within: portraits of ancestors, rare relics, and perhaps remnants of magic long forgotten. She glanced at Alf, uncertain. "Should I?" she began, but Alf's eyes met hers, steady and calm. "You should," he said simply. "Some truths call only once. To ignore them is to lose what is waiting." Alara hesitated a moment longer, then stepped forward. Alf followed silently, like a shadow molded to her steps. The east wing door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing dust-draped corridors and walls lined with paintings so old that their colors had begun to fade into whispers of memory. At the far end, a single portrait hung alone, illuminated by a slant of golden light from a high window. Ilara approached it slowly, her breath catching in her throat. The man in the painting bore a striking resemblance to Alf, tall, dark-haired, eyes that seemed to hold storms and secrets. Yet there was a softness in the expression that Alf rarely allowed himself to show. She reached out, almost touching the painting, when a small note tucked behind the frame fell into her hands. Written in delicate, flowing script, it read, "For my lost love waiting beyond time." Ilara's heart skipped. Her eyes lifted to Alf, who had stepped closer, watching her intently. "Do you know this man?" she asked softly. Alf's jaw tightened slightly. He seemed caught between the urge to speak and the need to hold silence. "I may know him in ways I cannot yet explain," he said finally. His voice was low, tinged with emotion he rarely revealed. Ilara's mind swirled. Could it be? A centuries-old portrait, a note of love, and yet he stood here alive. Something unspoken bound them together, something beyond explanation, beyond reason. Her chest ached with curiosity, longing, and a strange fear she could not name. The quiet stretched between them. Alf seemed to struggle with himself, as if words were chains he could not release. Finally, he turned away, walking toward the window, shadows playing across his features. "Some truths are dangerous," he said quietly. "To know them is to risk everything. I have tried to protect you from them, though I now wonder if protection is what you truly need." Ilara swallowed hard. I don't understand," she whispered, "but I feel something I cannot explain." Alf's eyes softened, and for a moment the centuries of loneliness and restraint seemed to fall away. "It is the pull of what was always meant to be," he said. "And yet, it is also the weight of what has been lost. Be careful, Ilara. Some bonds are as dangerous as they are beautiful." That night, the estate was silent except for the distant call of owls and the whisper of wind through the trees. Ilara lay awake in her bed, the portrait in her mind, the words etched into her memory. She could not sleep, her thoughts tangled with questions and feelings she had never dared to admit. Alf remained in his chamber, restless. He could hear her movements even through the thick walls. The sight of her curiosity, her quiet courage, ignited something within him he had long kept buried. He had loved her in secret for decades, unseen and unheard. He had watched her, protected her, and now she was here, so close, yet still untouched by the truths he carried. Dawn approached, pale and fragile, casting its first light through the manor windows. Alf stood silently at the threshold of his chamber, gazing toward Ilara's room. He knew that their lives were now intertwined, that their fates were shifting in ways neither could yet control. And yet the question lingered unspoken. When would the moment come for truth, and what would it cost them both? The day ahead promised danger and revelation. There were forces beyond the estate, unseen eyes that watched and whispered, waiting for a chance to interfere. And within the walls of the manor, a tension grew, fragile as glass, delicate as the wings of a trapped bird. Alf's secrets pressed close, while Ilara's curiosity and courage pushed toward discovery. Somewhere in the shadows, destiny stirred. The threads of past and present, of love and longing, began to weave together. And as the sun rose higher, painting the manor in soft light, a single thought lingered in both their minds. Neither of them would ever be the same again. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the whispers of the past, the promise of secrets yet to be revealed, and the undeniable truth that two hearts, long separated by time and circumstance, were beginning to draw together, fragile but unstoppable. The wind outside the manor carried a chill that made the trees shiver, their long, bare branches scratching against the stone walls like restless fingers. Lady Ilara stood at the window of her private chamber, staring at the distant forest. The portrait in the east wing haunted her thoughts, its dark eyes seeming to follow her wherever she went. The man in the painting, the man who looked so much like Alf, was a mystery she could not unravel. Her heart felt strangely heavy, as if pulled by invisible threads she could neither see nor resist. Alf entered quietly, his footsteps soundless on the polished floor. He paused behind her, his presence a shadow that both comforted and unnerved her. "You have not slept well," he observed softly, his gray eyes studying her with quiet concern. "I cannot," Alara admitted, turning to face him. "I keep thinking about the portrait. About the words, 'for my lost love waiting beyond time.' Who was he? And why does he feel connected to you?" Alf hesitated, the shadow of the past crossing his face. For decades he had lived with secrets that were both a burden and a shield. To reveal them now could change everything, but he sensed the truth could no longer remain hidden. "That man," he said finally, his voice low and careful, "is a part of a history that has touched me, more than I can fully explain. There are truths in this world that are dangerous, and yet some cannot remain hidden forever." Alara's gaze softened. "Then tell me, I want to understand." Alf looked at her, a storm of emotion in his eyes. He had loved her from afar for years, protecting her even when she did not know it. Every time he had observed her laughter, her sorrow, her quiet moments of reflection, his heart had ached with longing. And now she was here in his life, yet so close and still untouchable. "I will tell you," he said, "but first you must promise to listen without fear. The path ahead is not simple and the truth may be heavier than you expect." Alara nodded. "I promise." For a long moment Alf searched her face, seeing in her eyes a courage that had always drawn him to her. Then he began. "I am bound by a curse," he admitted. "It is not one of my own choosing. It has kept me alive for longer than any mortal should, and it has shaped the man you see before you. The man in the portrait is connected to me. He is a reflection of what I was before the curse, before the shadows claimed me." Alara's breath caught. "A curse?" "Yes," he said, his voice low. "It has given me long life, knowledge, and power, but it has also taken from me freedom. And for all these years I have loved you from afar, unable to act, unable to speak, unable to reach you without bringing danger." Her heart raced. She had felt a pull toward him from the moment she saw him, but now she understood the depth of the struggle behind those calm, commanding eyes. "You loved me," she whispered, disbelief and wonder mingling in her voice. Alf nodded, his gaze fixed on her. "For longer than you can imagine. And now that you are here, closer than ever, I fear the world will test us in ways I cannot always protect you from." The weight of his confession hung between them, thick and potent. Alara felt a rush of emotions, fear, longing, fascination, and an undeniable desire to understand him, to bridge the gap between them. She stepped closer, the distance shrinking between them, and for the first time she allowed herself to see the man behind the shadows. Their hands brushed, tentative, electric. Alf's breath caught at the contact. It was a connection he had imagined for years but never dared to touch. "Alara," he whispered, "I cannot promise an easy path. The forces around us, they are old and they are patient. But if you are willing, I will protect you and I will not let you face this world alone." Her voice trembled, but she answered, I want to be with you, Alf, even if it is dangerous." The shadows seemed to stir in response, curling along the walls and around the corners of the room as if aware of the bond forming. Alf felt a flicker of hope and dread entwined in his chest. For centuries, he had loved her in silence. Now the possibility of her love in return was both exhilarating and terrifying. Days passed, each one filled with growing tension and quiet longing. Alf and Alara moved carefully around each other, sharing meals, walking in the gardens, and speaking in hushed tones about anything and everything except the curse that bound him. Yet the air between them was charged with unspoken words and glances that lingered too long to be casual. Every touch, every shared smile, felt like a small rebellion against the rules of fate and time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the forest was bathed in violet and silver light, a messenger arrived at the manor. He carried a sealed letter marked with the sigil of the High Council, the secretive body that governed magic and ancient powers in the kingdom. Alf took the letter with a steady hand, his eyes darkening as he broke the seal. Alara watched him, curiosity and fear mingling in her chest. "What is it?" she asked softly. He did not answer immediately. The letter contained news that some forces outside the manor were aware of his presence, aware of the awakening bond between them. There were those who coveted the power of the cursed and would not hesitate to intervene. Alf's jaw tightened as he read the words. "There are dangers approaching," he said finally, "forces that will not see you safe if I do not act." Alara's heart raced. "Then we must leave." "Yes," he said, "we must journey to the shadowed veil. There is an artifact there, one that can strengthen the bond we share and may even weaken the curse that binds me. But the path will not be easy and the dangers are very real." Alara felt a mixture of fear and resolve. "Then we go," she said. "I am not afraid, Alf." "Not with you." Alf's eyes softened, though the weight of centuries lingered in their depths. "Your courage is remarkable," he said. "I will need it more than you know." The next morning they set out, leaving the safety of the estate behind. The journey led them through dense forests, winding paths and valleys shrouded in mist. The air was thick with magic, the land itself seeming to whisper warnings and secrets. Alf moved with purpose, guiding Alara past hidden dangers and unseen traps. Yet despite the peril, their connection grew stronger, each moment together intensifying the bond they both feared and craved. On the second night, as they camped beneath the stars, Alara found herself sitting closer to Alf than before. The firelight danced across his face, revealing glimpses of the man behind the shadows, the man who had loved her for decades. "Alf," she said softly, "all this time, why did you never tell me?" He looked away, shadows flickering across his features. "Because I feared what it might do to you," he admitted. "I feared that my love and the curse I carry would bring you pain. I wanted to protect you, even if it meant enduring my own loneliness." Alara reached out, taking his hand in hers. The warmth of his skin against her palm was electric, and Alf's breath hitched. "You don't need to protect me alone anymore," she said. "We are together now. Whatever comes, we face it together." For a moment the world seemed still. The wind softened, the firelight glimmered, and the forest around them held its breath. Alf felt a rare, fragile peace settle over him. He had loved her in silence for so long, and now, finally, she was here, aware, willing, and brave. But the moment of peace was fragile. From the shadows beyond the firelight, a movement stirred, silent, deliberate. Eyes watched them from the darkness, unseen yet knowing, waiting for the right moment to strike. Alf's instincts tightened, his hand gripping hers with sudden urgency. "Someone is near," he whispered, his voice low and tense. "We are not alone." Alara's eyes widened. "What do we do?" "We stay close," Alf said, standing and positioning himself between her and the shadows. "And we wait. Courage will guide us, but we must be ready for anything." The night deepened, and the forest whispered secrets older than the kingdom itself. Alf's curse hummed faintly in the air, a reminder that the path they walked was dangerous, that forces beyond their control sought to intervene. Yet in the midst of the darkness, one truth shone brightly. Their bond, long denied and tested by time, was now alive, unyielding, and defiant. As the fire flickered and shadows stretched across the ground, Alf's heart ached with longing and hope. He had dreamed of this moment for decades, and now that it was real, he knew the road ahead would test them both in ways neither could anticipate. And somewhere in the darkness, hidden eyes waited, as patient and relentless as time itself. Alara, sensing the weight of his thoughts, whispered, "Whatever comes, we face it together." Alf nodded, his hand still holding hers. "Together," he repeated, the word carrying a promise as ancient as his curse and as fragile as the night around them. The fire burned low, the shadows deepened, and the journey into the unknown continued. The forest seemed endless, a shadowed labyrinth of twisting trees and mist that clung to the ground like a living veil. Lady Alara followed Alf carefully, each step heavy with purpose. The path led them toward the shadowed vale, a place whispered about in old legends, said to hold the power to alter fate and confront curses older than the kingdoms themselves. Alf walked with silent confidence, though his mind was burdened by worry. The bond he shared with Alara had grown stronger with each day, but danger also drew closer. Ancient forces watched, patient and relentless, testing the courage and resolve of anyone who dared to challenge their will. Alf had lived for centuries, yet he had never faced a trial as perilous as protecting the woman he loved. Alara felt the weight of anticipation pressing against her chest, yet fear did not dominate. She had chosen to walk beside him, and she would face whatever lay ahead. "Alf," she said softly, glancing at him, "I do not know what awaits us, but I trust you, always." He looked at her, a faint smile breaking through the shadows that lingered in his eyes. "And I trust you, Alara. You are braver than you know, stronger than even I realized. Together we may face what the world cannot." The forest opened into a valley shrouded in mist. In the center, a large stone pedestal rose from the ground, etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. Alf's eyes narrowed. This was it, the place where the artifact lay, the key to easing the curse that had defined his long, shadowed life. As they approached, the wind rose, carrying whispers that seemed almost like voices from another time. Alf raised a hand, the air around him shimmering faintly as he prepared to confront whatever guardians or enchantments protected the artifact. "Stay close," he instructed. "The forces here are old, powerful, and will test both our hearts and our minds." Alara stepped closer, courage threading through her fear. "I am not leaving your side," she said firmly. "We face this together." Alf nodded, grateful for her strength. He moved toward the pedestal, tracing the etched symbols with his fingers. The ground trembled slightly underfoot and the mist thickened. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through their bones. Suddenly, shadows lifted from the ground, forming shapes of beings long forgotten, specters of the veil, guardians of the artifact, testing their resolve. Alf drew closer to Alara, his hand brushing hers briefly. That touch was enough to steady both of them, a silent reassurance that they were not alone. "You must trust me completely," Alf said quietly, his voice carrying both command and intimacy. "I cannot protect you if your mind doubts." Alara met his gaze, courage blooming in her chest. "I trust you, Alf, always." The shadows advanced, swirling around them like a storm of whispers. Alf's hands glowed faintly as he drew on the magic tied to his cursed blood. Energy lanced outward, pushing the spectral forms back, but their advance was relentless. Alf realized that force alone would not be enough. They had to confront the trial together, heart and mind aligned. "Focus on me," Alf said, his voice steady, "and on the bond we share. Let it guide you as it guides me." Alara closed her eyes, reaching for the connection she felt with him, the invisible threads that had drawn them together across years and centuries. In that moment, the fear and tension that had built over the journey melted, leaving only clarity and trust. When she opened her eyes, the shadows hesitated, as if sensing the unity between them. Alf extended his hands, palms glowing brighter, the magic resonating with the bond they now shared openly. Together, they spoke a wordless vow, heart, mind, and spirit in harmony. The shadows shrieked and dissipated, retreating into the mist, leaving the artifact atop the pedestal untouched. Alara stepped forward, her hand brushing against the cold stone. The artifact pulsed beneath her touch, resonating with Alf's energy. Alf's curse, heavy for centuries, began to weaken, the oppressive shadow that had clung to him like a second skin dissolving under the combined force of their courage and love. Alf fell to one knee beside her, exhaustion and relief mingling in his gaze. "It is done," he whispered. "The curse, it no longer controls me, but its shadow remains, a reminder of the past and the choices we must always guard." Alara knelt beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "We have faced it together," she said softly. "Whatever remains, we face it as one." For the first time, Alf allowed himself to truly smile, a smile that reached beyond centuries of pain and longing. "You have given me more than freedom," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You have given me a chance at life and love. True love, the kind I never thought I would experience." Alara's chest tightened with emotion. "And you have given me hope," she whispered. "Hope that even in darkness something beautiful can bloom." The wind shifted, carrying with it the first rays of dawn, golden light spilling across the misty valley. Alf rose to his feet, taking her hands in his. "Our journey is not over," he said. "There will always be challenges, shadows that seek to test us. But as long as we face them together, nothing can break us." Alara nodded, her eyes bright. "Together," she echoed. They turned to leave the vale, walking side by side, their bond now unbreakable. The journey back through the forest felt different, lighter, infused with the promise of what they could build together. Alf shared stories of the past, memories he had kept hidden, and Alara listened, fascinated, touched, and honored by the trust he placed in her. As night fell once again, they returned to the manor, weary but victorious. The estate felt alive in a new way, as if it, too, recognized the transformation that had taken place. Alf's presence no longer carried only shadows, but warmth, hope, and a sense of belonging. In the quiet of the manor's great hall, Alf took Alara's hands in his own. "There is something I must say," he murmured, his gray eyes searching hers with intensity. "I loved you long before you even knew my name. I have waited through decades of silence, carried longing across lifetimes, and now I have you here by choice, by courage, by fate." Tears glimmered in Alara's eyes. "And I have waited for something I could not name," she admitted. "Something I felt but could not understand until now. Alf, I love you." Alf drew her close, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling, hearts aligned. The weight of centuries lifted, leaving only the purity of the connection they had fought to protect. For the first time, they could embrace their love fully, without fear, without shadows pressing in. Days turned into weeks, and the manor became a place of healing, laughter, and quiet joy. Alf and Alara explored the lands, uncovering forgotten paths, ancient gardens, and relics of magic that now seemed benevolent rather than threatening. Their bond, forged through trials, strengthened with each shared moment, each act of trust and courage. Yet even in the peace, they remained vigilant. Alf's past and the remnants of the curse were reminders that darkness could return, but neither feared it. Together, they had proven that love, courage, and trust could overcome shadows older than kingdoms. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Alf and Alara stood on the balcony of the manor. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying memories of trials faced and victories won. Alf turned to her, his eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. "Whatever comes," he said softly, "we face it together. I am no longer bound by shadows alone. With you, I am free." Alara smiled, resting her hand against his chest. "And I am no longer alone," she whispered. "With you, Alf, I am whole." The stars began to twinkle, one by one, over the darkening forest. The world, vast and ancient, seemed to pause in quiet recognition of their union. Time, which had separated them and tested them, now bowed to the bond they had forged, a bond unbroken by curse, by fear, or by distance. In the hush of the night, they embraced, hearts entwined, spirits aligned, ready to face whatever the world might bring. Shadows may linger, the wind may whisper, and ancient forces may watch. But together, Alf and Alara had discovered the greatest power of all, love that could endure, transform, and redeem. And as the moon rose over the kingdom, silver and serene, they stood together, hand in hand, no longer bound by fear, no longer divided by past secrets. The world in all its beauty and danger stretched before them, and for the first time they stepped forward unafraid, two hearts, once separated by time and circumstance, finally united. The shadows of the past were behind them, and the dawn of their shared future had arrived.